We're here today with a very dear and old friend of mine, Fran Hauser, whom I met when I was working in LCS, and she was our client while she was at People. So this was over a decade ago. We met at one fateful fun dinner. So those dinners that we do for our clients really do pay off in spades with friendships to last the years. So Fran and I have been in touch while she's been on her journey of writing and publishing this book, and it's really a wonderful and candid read on some of the experiences that she's had personally, experiences about women around her and women that she's mentored, and as we can see by the turn-up, it's a very relevant topic for most of us. So Fran is a startup investor, a longtime media executive and former president of digital at Time Inc., the author of The Myth of the Nice Girl, Achieving a Career You Love Without Becoming a Person You Hate. She has held senior positions at some of the world's largest digital media businesses, including Time Inc.'s People, InStyle and Entertainment, as well as AOL and Moviefone. Sorry, Entertainment Weekly, as well as AOL and Moviefone. She's now an angel investor, so switching into the tech industry, who largely invests in female founders and named one of Refinery 29's 6 most powerful women in New York City's tech scene, and one of Business Insider's 30 women in venture capital and to watch in 2018. She's been featured on CNBC, Forbes, Vogue.com, Ad Age, and more. Please welcome Fran Hauser.
Thank you. What an amazing turnout. This is incredible.
It's really amazing,
so
and I think the, like I said, I think the topic really just impacts so many of us. Just to quickly kick off, I think when I read the book, it felt like a letter to my younger self, but still so many things that I struggle with day to day. And I think it's one of those books that if you have it on hand, there will be chapters that will be more relevant to you throughout certain parts of your career and give really practical tips and really key takeaways just to keep those things in the back of your mind as you're going through the situations. So thank you. I can barely look at my book anymore because it's like all highlighted and dog-eared and notes on the side.
That.
Fran went to sign my book and she's like, where?
Oh my God, I love
So maybe I'll take a clean copy.
Which, by the way, let me just add one thing about that. That was really my goal with the book, is I really wanted it to be actionable. Sanam, I worked with at Time Inc. for years, and I think you can vouch for this. I'm an operator at heart. You know, I execute, and it was really important to me that there are tips and techniques and strategies and things that you can actually do that you can incorporate into your everyday work life.
Yep.
So that's like the best compliment that I can get, is that you have all of that.
All the notes, yeah. And just the little catchphrases or the little descriptors that just stick in your mind. Even if you don't realize it when you're reading it, you'll catch yourself in that moment doing the things. So we'll talk about a few of those today that really stuck out for me. But first, obviously, who here has felt like they've either gotten feedback or they've recounted a situation in the back of their mind where they felt like being too nice has kept them out of an opportunity at work? And we're all in this room for a reason, right? It's really something where, I think our culture here at Google really wants everyone to bring your full self and to have the psychological safety to share your opinions. And so with that, you think it's kindness. But the truth is, in business, sometimes you feel like that could be a liability. So in your book, you talk about how the word nice is emotionally loaded, particularly for women. I would love to hear how you define being nice.
Yeah. So specifically when it comes to work, when I think about a woman or a man, actually, who's in a professional environment, and they're nice, I think about somebody who is empathetic, who's collaborative, and who's confident that there are enough opportunities to go around. And I think that last part is really important because that's really more of an abundance mentality. Where it's not like, if you win, it means that I have to lose.
Right.
There's a real generosity that comes with that. And the premise of the book is actually really simple in that if you're nice, if you do all those things, you're empathetic, you're collaborative, you're generous, what that does is it engenders trust. And when you have trust, that allows you to build a relationship. And at the end of the day, being successful in business is all about relationships.
Yep.
Right? It all comes back to relationships. And the other big message in the book is that you don't have to choose between being nice and being tough. you can be both. And there's that duality that I think really runs throughout the whole book. So like when I'm talking about communication, it's you can be kind and direct.
Yep.
You know, when you're negotiating, you can be empathetic and strategic. So these things aren't mutually exclusive.
Yep. I think it's a very important point.
Are you okay? It's the
All good.
almonds that we ate. We were
I think
so
we were like
hungry
eating
for
nuts before this. Everything's
right.
fine. Well, it's interesting when you talk about the duality, because I did a program in Oxford last year where we kind of walked around an imaginary forest, and you were holding an imaginary stick in this imaginary forest, and that imaginary stick was your greatest strength. And so you walked around the forest, you were talking with other people in the program, you had your stick with you, so you're really thinking about what this greatest strength was. And then they asked you to think about a time when that stick had become your greatest weakness, and how do you set that down? So it's a really interesting exercise, but in the book, Fran talked about empathy being your Achilles heel. And I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. Well, I over-index on empathy. And while empathy is an incredible, I think, trait, where it has hurt me in the past is when I care so much about what other people are feeling and thinking that it makes it difficult for me to make a decision. Because when you care so much, you want to make everybody happy, and you're getting buy-in, and you're checking in with everyone. And that slows down the decision-making process. And especially working in technology or working in media, you need to move quickly. Time to market is everything. Whether it's you're working on a product and you're trying to figure out which features to leave in and which features get scoped out, it's really important to keep the momentum going and to move quickly. So that's where it's actually hurt me, and I've had to make sure that I pull back on that, and that I really be aware of that and be cognizant of it.
Amen on that, because
Right.
and I think the nuance and the line that you're drawing here is collaboration to a degree, right?
Yeah.
At some point, you've just got to make a decision instead of waiting for a decision to be made for you. But it's really challenging, I think, when you're so empathetic and you want to make sure that everyone is feeling included and everyone is along for the ride. At some point, particularly as you grow into leadership positions in your career, people are looking to you to make those decisions, and people are looking to you to be that decisive voice. So it's been a very relevant lesson for me recently.
And I think you definitely want to show people that you're listening to them, and that you respect them, and that you're getting their input, and that you're considering their input. But then at the end of the day, you have to stand in your own two shoes, and you have to make that tough call. And when you inform the team that you've made the decision, I think it's great to say, look, I really respect what every single one of you had to say, and I took it into consideration. But at the same time, we really need to move forward. And I had to make a decision. Some of you are not going to be happy with it, right? But we have to move forward.
And I think what I found, there's a way because actually it provides relief. Even if they disagree with the decision or feel like it's not going in a direction they love, there's a relief that a decision's been made. Anyway, I literally ran out of highlighter ink in this chapter because this was, like I said, just very relevant for me right now, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. There's stages of your career where different parts of this will be relevant and you'll remember them to go back to. So one of my favorite Maya Angelou quotes is the one where, and I'm going to slaughter this, but when a woman stands up for herself, unbeknownst to her, she stands up for all women. You had a great anecdote during your time at Moviefone when you were the only woman in the room, and I think we can all relate to certain meetings where we've been the only woman in the room. Can you share that anecdote with the room?
Yeah. So this was probably 15 years ago at this point, so I was the only woman in the room, and I was a lot younger. And we flew out. I was the general manager of Moviefone at the time, and my team and I flew out to LA to meet with one of the big movie studios. And we were ushered into this conference room, and we were waiting for the CEO of the movie studio to come in. His team was there, but we were just kind of waiting for him. And he walks in, and he says hello to everybody, and then he turned to me and asked me to get him coffee because he just assumed that I was the assistant. And I just shook his hand and I said, "Oh, we haven't met. I'm Fran Hauser. I'm the general manager of Moviefone." And he was a personality. I mean, he really was like larger than life. And he's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You know, like he just kind of like used humor like to deflect it. And then he called out to his assistant and asked her to, you know, to get him coffee. But I think it really was an important moment because look, if I was just out of college and someone asked me to get coffee, I'd get the coffee. Like, would I be happy about it? No, but I would still do it, right? Because you want to be helpful and you want to show that you have a great attitude and you have great energy and all that good stuff. But at that point in my career, like I was running Moviefone. Right. So I'm not going to go get coffee for, you know, like it's just, and I think the way that I said it too, it was very, it wasn't emotional. You know, it was just like very matter of fact, like, oh, we haven't met, you know, and it was fine. And I think I set a really good example for everyone on my team. Too.
So when I read this part of the book, what stood out to me, what you described in writing was really, like we all have those moments when you walk away from a situation, you're like, oh, I should have said that. Like I had the best comeback or the best way to handle that like 10 minutes later. And so you described a little bit of that, just like taking a beat in that moment. So when there's times where you feel like you're being undermined or assumptions are being made about you, is taking that beat about how you present yourself versus how people are perceiving you. And I think that really came across to me as something that was probably wise beyond your years at that stage to have that moment, but also setting that example for the rest of the people in the room, like, wow, that guy just made a fool out of himself, and at least he recognized it and she called him out, but I'm probably not gonna make that mistake now. So that's kind of the paying it forward aspect. So actually speaking about speaking up in meetings, I think, you know, one thing that I notice here at Google, and for those of you that know me, it's not a surprise, I'm pretty outspoken, maybe to a fault, too candid, but I do speak up in a lot of meetings, and I'm always fine to ask a question and say, I'm not sure if you covered this already. We're all multitasking all the time. I'm not sure if you covered this already, or maybe I missed it, or there's, you know, and asking questions I think a lot of other people in the room have, but are worried to ask. So I know that this is a common thing with women in terms of speaking up, and you have a great story early on in your career. I think it was at Ernst & Young, where you kept saying, that's interesting. Can you share a little bit about the learnings there?
Yeah, I mean, I was so young. I was probably like 23, and Coca-Cola Enterprises was our client, and we were, you know, in that office, in the Coca-Cola offices for like months at a time, like working until 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was this imposing older man who was a VP at Coke, and I was just so intimidated by him. And every time he was in the room, like all that I could muster to say was, that's interesting. No matter what he said, I was always like, that's interesting, literally for like probably a month. And finally, a mentor of mine, Lou Sharetta, called me out like after one of the meetings and just said, you have to stop this. Do you realize what you're doing? Like you literally just keep saying that's interesting. It's so not interesting for you to be saying that's interesting. Like just say anything else. And I needed somebody. I don't know if you guys have ever had a moment where you just needed somebody to call you out on something. And when he did that, I really made a commitment to myself. Okay, the next meeting I'm gonna say something, even if it's short, other than that's interesting. And I did, and it was really hard, and I was really nervous, but I did it, and it just made me more comfortable. Like I felt like every time I was in a meeting with him, I would say more and more, and I would start sharing my opinions and point of view. And I ended up developing such a great relationship with this guy, and he would come by my cube and ask for my opinion on things, and eventually he ended up hiring me. I left Ernst & Young to go to work at Coca-Cola Enterprises. So that was a moment. But I do see, honestly, it's like 2018, and I'm still seeing in meetings that there are, a lot of women who they have so much to say, but they're not speaking up in meetings. They're still quiet. And I see it at universities. I was speaking 6 months ago at a college here in New York City, where it was probably 150 people in the room, mostly women. And when it came time for Q&A, all the men raised their hands and one woman raised her hand. They came up to me afterwards. They lined up like one-on-one to talk to me. And I asked the dean of the business school, is this common? And he said, every single time. Doesn't matter who's speaking, doesn't matter if it's a man, if it's a woman. It's always the guys that raise their hands. And it's shocking to me that like, even that generation, right, of college students, like we're still seeing this. Yeah. So, and by the way, there are a lot of women that have no problem at all, like you, which is incredible. So what I say to women like you is like, be aware of other women that may be struggling, and is there a way that you can be helpful to them?
Yeah.
Like, I know I've been in meetings where I will say, like, Sarah, you and I were just talking about this the other day. You had such, you know, you had a really great point of view on this. Can you share it with the group? Or, and if you are somebody who struggles with it, preparing, I think, is really helpful. If you're going into a meeting and you have the agenda, like, make a commitment that you're going to pick one thing and you're going to talk, you're going to say something. I think is really super helpful. I share sound bites and like stock phrases that you can use if you're having a hard time inserting yourself into a conversation. Like, just knowing, like, whether it's building on that, or I love that perspective, and like whatever that stock phrase is for you. Sometimes the hardest part is getting started.
Opening your mouth and speaking up.
So like having that stock phrase. And then the other thing I always say, go back to what you said about pausing, is your voice needs air to work, which means you really have to breathe. You know, you really have to like stop and breathe. Whether you're in a meeting, whether you're in a one-on-one, or whether you're public speaking, right? Like, making sure that you're taking the time to breathe is a big part of it too.
So that's one thing that Fran's saying that I just want to make sure is coming across, like, throughout the book, throughout each chapter. So whichever chapter is speaking to you at that project or whatever you're doing, is these, you know, 5 quick tips. So what she's saying, like, the way to interject into a conversation, give yourself that moment to get the floor and get the attention before you share the content of what you're saying. Those types of tips are really helpful, and they're quick things to keep in mind. And I think, you know, the other thing that should give anyone confidence that is worried about speaking up is ask yourself if you've ever been in a meeting where somebody has said something that you were just about to say and didn't raise your hand. You're like,
all the time.
Damn, that was just what I was going to say. So your ideas are valid. Your contributions are needed. There's no reason that somebody else should have to validate that for you, but give yourself that confidence. Use these tips to get the floor. And then if you're in a meeting where you notice you're trying to speak up and you don't have the space to do that, find an ally. Find somebody that can help you to speak up in that next phase.
And take up space. Like, I share a story in the book where I was at a board meeting. I was at a nonprofit board meeting, and this guy who I have so much respect for, he has a very loud voice. Like, he's very boisterous. And he had the floor. And I literally, like, just felt like I couldn't get a word in edgewise. And I just decided that I was going to stand in that moment. And I just, like, walked behind the chair and just, like, draped my, you know, arms over the chair. And it forced everybody to look at me. And it gave me the floor. So I think the other thing is, you guys may have heard, there's that stat that's when you're communicating, that 7% of the effectiveness is verbal and 93% is nonverbal, right? Like, really think about that. Like, 7% is the words that you're using, the content. 93% is everything else, right? It's your eye contact. It's, are you smiling? You know, are you taking up space? Or are you closed up? Like, it's all of that. So that's another thing to really keep in mind too.
And when we think about here at Google, we've just gone through our annual review cycle. Just to switch gears here, because you give a lovely shout out, and I don't know if anybody in the room worked on this, to a Gmail plugin of Just Not Sorry. So it's basically a plugin that will scan your emails to find out if there's times that you're apologizing excessively that you shouldn't be. Bless you. And I can't tell you how many times I want to like share with people, like, I had a woman email me from the West Coast 2 weeks ago, and I had emailed her something at 10 a.m. and she wrote back to me and said, sorry for the delay. It's 7 a.m. her time. I'm like, there is no delay here. Like, you should be brushing your teeth right now instead of answering my email. So those little things. Can you share, you had some specific tips about how you trained yourself to stop saying sorry?
Well, so a friend of mine actually called me out on this at work years ago. And, you know, she said, you apologize all the time. And I didn't realize that I was doing it, and I didn't believe her. So I actually went into my inbox and I typed the word sorry into the search field.
Oh, wow.
And literally, like, hundreds of emails returned. And I started reading them. And what I found was exactly what you just said. Literally, like, it took me 4 hours to respond to someone. And my response was, so sorry it took me so long to get back to you. Like, it'd been 4 hours. And when you apologize for such trivial things, it puts you in a weak position, right? There's no reason to apologize. If you hurt somebody, of course you should apologize. Like, if you do something that really hurts someone.
If you ignore the email for 5 days, Fair enough.
Right. I mean, but so that's what I found. So that's when I downloaded the Gmail plugin. And it's brilliant because it basically scans, right, your email. And if you're using the word sorry, it just flags it for you. Like, I don't have to do it anymore because I feel like now I'm like pretty
You've
good.
trained, yeah.
I've trained myself. But in the beginning, it was really helpful. And just rereading your emails,
Yep.
I think really important. I also found that if I replaced I'm sorry with thank you, that typically works. So it's more like thank you for the opportunity, you know, as opposed to I'm so sorry that I can't do it.
Oh,
It's,
got
you know
it.
what I mean?
So like when people are asking you of things,
It's just reframing
Yeah.
it. It's
Yep.
like being thankful as opposed to leading with, you know, I'm sorry.
Yep.
So I think that's really helped. Having an accountability buddy, like having somebody like my friend who called me out on this, I basically just asked her, like, if you see me doing it, just let me know.
Yeah.
So that's always helpful. But, you know, so much research has been done on this that women do apologize a lot more than men.
Yep.
Probably has something to do with when we were younger, I'm thinking. But it is something that we just have to be really, really aware of.
Yep. So we're going to open it up to some questions. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to walk up to the mic. In the meantime, I'll continue asking another question while folks are coming up. It can't be just the men, just so you know. So I loved, and this is actually, again, pretty pertinent to now, given we're going through performance review cycles, but you talk about the anecdotes around difficult conversations and how you respond assertively yet nicely. Can you share some of your strategies to deliver tough messages?
Yeah, so one of the pieces of research that we did when we were writing the book was around the amygdala and in your brain and how it works, and the fact that it's looking for threats, physical threats, psychological threats. And what happens is when you're feeling threatened, you go into either fight, flight, or freeze, which is very unproductive. So that was really important to me when I read that, because what that made me realize is when you're giving a performance review, if you start the review with, you know, look, we have some stuff we need to talk about, that automatically is a threat to the other person, and you're going to have a very unproductive conversation. Versus starting it out with, I'm your biggest fan and champion, and I want to see you succeed, you know, and I'm here with you, and I have some things that I want to share with you. It's all about how you start the conversation, I think, is so important. The other thing I would say, and I wrote a blog post for Forbes about this like 2.5 years ago, is the power of questioning, asking questions, and having the person sort of come to the conclusion on their own in terms of what they really need to work on. And here's a very specific example, but if you ask, what do you think could have been done differently, as opposed to what do you think you could have done differently, it makes it so much more objective, and it's not like a personal attack.
Right.
But when something goes wrong, you know, a product doesn't launch on time, it goes over budget, whatever it is, I think framing it that way, what do you think could have been done differently? Yeah. You know, again, it puts the person in a safe place. So I think that's always helpful too. And sharing like larger context. If you're giving somebody advice about what they need to work on, in the context of the company's mission or goals, like how does that fit in? Because I do think that's really important, like aligning it and tying it back to what the larger mission of your department or the company is also really
just takes
really
that like
helpful.
Personal attack feeling out of it.
But really like making the person feel like I really want you to succeed. You know, I'm here for you. Goes such a long way. But then being direct. I know she's like,
I'm like, I'll take any feedback you have right now. How am I doing in this Q&A?
Great. You're doing amazing. You really are. But at the same time, also, like when you do have to give that feedback, being clear and specific about what the person needs to work on. Because I have had managers who are a little bit more kind of touchy-feely, warm and fuzzy, who are trying to give me feedback, but I'm not really understanding, like, what do I need to do? Like, be really constructive. So it's sort of, again, it's that dance. It's that balance of being really kind and caring, but being specific and direct.
Yeah, and if you feel like you're not getting that, ask for it.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's take a question from the audience. Thanks for stepping up.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So I'm actually an executive assistant here, and something we deal with all the time is something that you mentioned. people having the connotation that when they're assumed they're an admin, it's a negative thing, which is really frustrating for us. And there's a lot of admins in here. I see you all, and I'm sure you agree with me, especially since it's a very gendered role. It's mostly women, especially at Google, and we hear all the time, like, they thought I was the assistant, and like that's insulting to us, as you can imagine. And then a question kind of based on that is, in my role especially, I'll only speak for myself, I feel like I'm often having to be on the defensive because since I'm not an executive like Bethany or like my VP, people try and take advantage of me, and when I do push back, the feedback I always get is to be nicer, but it's hard, and so I'm just curious your thoughts. I mean, you weren't always an executive, obviously, neither were you, Bethany, and so how do women, especially in roles that are deemed unworthy, as I dare say, be nice but still push back? Because it's frustrating how it's like, have a voice, and then we're like, but be nice, you're supposed to be cheery, blah, blah, blah. So.
Well, you know, and I have to say, like,
Thank you.
Thank you. That's such a great question. I always give advice to women, especially that are coming out of college, when they're a little confused about what they want to do. Like, they feel like they want to work in business, but they don't know exactly like what function or department. I always say, like, being an assistant is amazing. It's like such an incredible way to get to know all the different aspects of a company. I mean, I think about when I was at Time Inc., Sanem, you know, like with my assistants, they usually worked with me for a year, and it was my goal for them that they got exposure and that they would figure out like what they wanted to do. So for me, I think it's an incredible opportunity, truthfully, that because I think about how I started out. I started out in finance, and I felt like I was so. It was so narrow. Like I couldn't move. Like if I wanted to move into marketing, like when I was at Coca-Cola, like that's not going to happen. Like I was in finance, I couldn't move. I feel like when you're an assistant, you have so much opportunity. You could go kind of wherever you want to go. So I think it's an amazing thing. I do hear you in terms of the tension between like, you know, pushing back and being nice. And I think that, you know, when you are an assistant, especially for your boss, for your manager, right? Like you are there in a way to make their lives easier, right? So that is sort of a, that kind of comes with the job. But at the same time, like I feel like you should be helpful, but you should never be subservient. Like if you feel like you're being asked to do something that truly is subservient, I think you do have to bring it up, and I think you do have to have that conversation. Like I talk about in the book, there was a young woman, she was a graphic designer, and she felt like she was being asked to do things that she shouldn't be doing. And I sat down with her, and we went through like the whole list of everything that she was like annoyed about. And there were certain things where I felt like, you know what, you kind of do have to do that. Like she was making copies, this was 15 years ago. She was making copies for the design team. I'm like, you are like the most junior person on the team. Like I had to do that when I was the most junior person on the team. But then she was being asked to get coffee and snacks for the whole team every single afternoon. Like that's not appropriate.
Right.
To me, that falls into the subservient category. Yeah. And I think there's a way, like I encouraged her to have the conversation with her boss, which was, this is really distracting for me. Like I'm trying to get my work done, and then I have to stop because I have to get everybody's order. You know, could we create a sign-up sheet, and like, you know, different people can volunteer to do it on different days. What I like about that is she recommended a solution to it, as opposed to just going and saying like, this is bothering me. Yep. It's like, it's bothering me, it's because it's making me really unproductive, and here's what I think we should do about it. Yep. But I do think you have to bring things up like that. Yeah. Like, you know, my first year out of college, like I probably got coffee every single day for people, and I didn't mind it, because I felt like I was, at that point, I was so new. Like I was just learning, and I just wanted to build relationships with people, and I did feel like anything that I could do to be helpful would be a good thing, especially at that moment in my career and in my life. And it goes back to what you're saying, like you go through these transitions in your career, right? And you just kind of like have to know like what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, where do I push back, you know, where do I kind of just do it, you know? So.
And I think there's some helpful tips.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for being here. So you talked about getting the floor in a meeting. Like you talked about how you stood behind a chair and people, had the attention, but I find at Google the hard thing is keeping the floor, especially in an engineering space. People are very task-oriented. They're very decision forward, and it can be hard. I find women in particular get cut off a lot if they're kind of taking their time, like you suggested, breathing and thinking through what they're saying. They're just going to get cut off because they're not getting their point fast enough, and someone else will just make it for them. And I find myself doing this as well. So, how do you keep the floor in an engineering meeting?
Oh gosh, it's a great question. I think that I can tell you when in my career when I've gotten cut off, and there have been many, many, many moments. I will usually say, "Excuse me, I'm not finished," and I do. I mean, and again, you could say you don't have to come across like a jerk, but you could just say, "Excuse me, I'm not finished," and keep talking. And sometimes that works. I feel like if you have something really important to say, then you should say it, and you shouldn't be afraid to cut that person off, and just say, "Excuse me, I'm not done," and continue. I also wonder, going into these meetings, if you have a sense of what it is that you want to communicate, if there's a way to even practice ahead of time and get a little bit more sound bitey, if that makes sense. Like if you know that's the culture and that's the dynamic, that things are moving really fast. If there is an opportunity for you to prepare what you want to say, and to do it in a way where you get your point across really quickly, that's another thought. It's just practice. Practice and prepare.
Yep. Thank you.
Hi. Huge fan of your VC portfolio. I was just at the Wing Dumbo this past weekend, actually.
Thank you.
So you talk about being nice, and I share the same values in terms of empathy, especially within, engendering that within sort of female peer groups and whatnot. Before coming to Google, I worked in finance for a number of years, as well as tech, which are quite male-dominated industries, and not everyone valued being nice, rather expediency and effectiveness. And nice was kind of an ancillary term. And so I was wondering what your experiences were when not everyone valued being nice, and it wasn't quite so important, and how you sort of combated that, being someone who has a bit of a bleeding heart and is more empathetic.
Yeah, I think, so for me, it's really been always about over-delivering. And, whatever our goals were, whatever our metrics were, whether it was a revenue number that we needed to hit or monthly unique visitors. I think the culture that I always try to establish with my team is that we're going to deliver, but we're going to do it in a way that we feel good about. So I never really, it's not that I was leading with the nice. I was leading with we're going to deliver. We're going to have some really great results for the company, but we are going to feel great about the way we do it, right? It's not just about winning, it's about how you win. And I think that when you do both of those things, that you establish a reputation for yourself as somebody who can lead a team to deliver great results, but can also do it in a way where she's building relationships. So I think it's a nuance, but I do think it's really important, because at the end of the day, you do have to deliver for the company, right? That's
Yes.
kind of, right?
If I may, so
Yeah.
when your teams would come into contact with, say other, senior managers who didn't have the same exact approach or finesse, would you broach that topic in terms of what kind of culture are we breeding here in this organization, or is that something that you're I'm doing this within my team, and I'm sort of preaching these values to the folks that I'm working with, so I'm going to let it go with these other folks that I'm not managing?
Well, it's so funny. I was just with a woman who I used to work with at Time Inc. who I hadn't seen in 5 years. I had lunch with her yesterday, and she brought up a story of when we got this incredible win when we were at People magazine. We were being compared a lot to Sports Illustrated because they were really the first brand at Time Inc. to go digital in a big way. So we were constantly being compared.
That's
to
when
SI.
we were working together.
That's when we were working together, right? And they had their way of doing. That team had their way of doing things, and we had our way of doing things. And there was a big meeting that we were going to be having with the CEO. Because there was some pressure for us to be doing things the way that they were doing it. And Karen, who I had lunch with yesterday, she recalled like how much time and effort and energy we put into preparing for that meeting. But we went into it not from a place of defensiveness, but from a place of, you know, we feel really great about our approach. And there was no emotion, you know, but we were just, it was our way. And we ended up convincing the CEO that it was a good approach. So, and I'm like, that was so interesting because I totally forgotten about that. But it was one of many examples where departments, teams can have different approaches, right? But for us, I always instilled that. I always instilled that in my team. That was the culture. Sanam knows because she was part of the team. Like, it was just really important to me. And I tried as much as possible with my peers to have that kind of culture permeate, you know, into other parts of the company. And I would say Time Inc. was a pretty great culture overall. 5 minutes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. One other thing that I will say too that is shared in this book and also a different book that I read, but if you're struggling with things too, sometimes just approaching somebody that is that friction point for you and just saying like, hey, I'm really struggling with this. And then helps you launch into that. It's not coming, it doesn't get them on the defensive. It's about kind of providing that feedback. So
Harvard Business Review did this, this great piece of research around warmth and competence. Which is, you guys should look it up if you're not aware of it, because basically what it concluded is that you are going to evaluate someone first based on warmth and second based on competence. And that actually goes exactly to what you're saying and to what you're saying, right? It's, so is this person, can I trust this person? It's first, can I trust them? And then, can I respect them?
yeah.
But the first part is the warmth and the trust. And it's the way that you project, right?
Project into meetings and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Go
I'm
ahead.
writing down warmth and confidence, not
Okay.
text.
Okay, this will
So,
be the last question. Okay.
What can men do? So I just want to lead with a little bit of a concern that I have. I think men sometimes want to help, or often want to help, and they're confused about what to do. And one example I've seen of something that's not productive is mutual public shaming, where at least man to man,
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of like unjustified public shaming, and then that can, I also thought of like, okay, if I was a woman, how would I feel? And I think sometimes it could feel like fake chivalry, almost, where not the thing like, hey, have you let this person finish, but cases where it basically can amount to, you know, sort of muted public shaming between men. It doesn't feel productive to me.
Yeah.
So what can men do?
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that I really believe in is I would love for men to have an appreciation for different leadership styles and just really understanding that women may bring different traits, right, to work. Because that's one of the things I'm encouraging is bring your whole self to work.
Yeah.
Like, don't check qualities like kindness and empathy at the door when you go to work. And I've just had way too many women in my life, especially younger women, say to me that they work for men and that their male manager has said to them, like, you're too nice, you need to be tougher. So there's nothing constructive in that, you know? It's like, if you want to give constructive feedback, great. If you want to say you're spending too much time getting buy-in and you need to get to decisions quicker, that I can do something with that. But saying like, you're too nice, is not really constructive. So I think just having an appreciation that there are different types of leadership styles that can work. I think just being really open to that is something that I'm asking men to do as a result of this book.
And I think one thing that you just said is exactly what you should be doing. If I was a woman, how would this make me feel? And that awareness and your willingness to come to a place like this and listen to what's being told and ask a question like that, you're aware. And so the more you're in meetings and you see these types of activities or the things that you've heard your peers tell you is really frustrating to them, the more you're able to, you know, identify your own behaviors that may be seen as this odd chivalry or one-upmanship or whatever it is, and kind of catch yourselves of, guys, is this productive or is this just the way we've been talking to each other? And could this be a really toxic environment for somebody to come in and try to contribute ideas because they feel like they're going to be berated? Maybe that's comfortable for us one-on-one, but in a group environment, that could be a lot of toxicity. So kind of having that conversation with your peers, or when you see that, like, is there a more constructive way we could be having this conversation right now? And being aware. But I think you're already, sounds like 80% of the way there, and that you're internalizing some of this as, how would this feel to me if I were in different shoes? I think that's really the crux of inclusion. So thank
Love
you.
that.
So one last question before we let Fran go, or really a comment. Fran is a phenomenal networker, and I know that that is something that when I say the word, I'm like, ooh, I hate networking. And we were just having this conversation. It's really just talking to people, which I actually love. So I feel like it's one of those things that your network becomes so valuable to you. And she's got some great tips in the book. So please do read. It's the final chapter in the book. But can you share some quick takeaways on your
Well,
views?
I think it's just really being intentional about it, making it a priority, making sure that you set time on your calendar, whether it's once or twice a week, to meet with somebody, either in a different department or outside of Google. I know that if I hadn't built the network that I built, I wouldn't have been able to make this transition from media to investing. And I also feel like not being parasitic, but being helpful to the other person when you're networking. This young woman sent me a note, totally cold, on LinkedIn that I loved. She said, I'd love to get like 30 minutes of your time over coffee. And I see that there are 2 companies in your portfolio that I think I can give you some social media strategies for. And to me, that was amazing. So I'm like, okay, she's going to be helpful to me too. Right? It's not that she's just asking from me to pick my brain.
Yes,
But
that,
like
you
the whole
highlight
pick my
that,
brain. But it's how can you be helpful to the other person?
And it's that quid pro quo, and it's not that you're sitting there talking to somebody like, what can I get from you, and what do I have to give you to get it? Like, that's not what this is all about. But if we're not out there to help one another, we're all in trouble. So with that, thank you so much, Fran, for coming.
Thank you. It was amazing. Thank you.